Before we begin, I want to ask you to subscribe to this channel and hit that like button if you enjoy these stories from the field. It really helps us continue sharing these accounts, and please, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know how far these stories reach. Now, let's get into what happened during the winter of 1994 at Yellowstone National Park. My name is Luke Chadwick, and for 8 years I worked as a park ranger in Yellowstone, before the winter of 1994 changed everything I thought I knew about this place I had sworn to protect. Many people only know Yellowstone in the summer. Crowds of tourists, traffic jams caused by tourists watching bison, the predictable eruptions of Old Faithful. But in winter, Yellowstone is a completely different world. When the first heavy snowfall in November closes the roads, the park becomes a primitive and boundless place. The crowds disappear, lodging facilities close, and the few rangers who volunteer for winter duty become the only human presence in over 2 million acres of frozen wilderness I volunteered for winter duty every year. My ex-wife used to say I was running from something, and maybe she was right. After the divorce, after the wildfire season that took 3 of my crew, I found something peaceful in the solitude of Yellowstone's winters. Just me, the wildlife, and the endless white silence. The winter of 1994 was my 3rd season on the skeleton crew. There were only 6 of us covering the entire park. Jake Reeves was my partner, assigned to the same sector, the thermal basin areas around the Norris Geyser Basin and the backcountry between Norris and Mammoth Hot Springs. Jake was 10 years older than me, a Wyoming native who knew these mountains better than anyone I'd ever met. We'd spent 2 winters together, and he'd become more than a partner. He was the closest thing to family I had left. It was January 15th when everything started. The temperature had dropped to -28 Fahrenheit, cold enough that your breath would freeze before it hit the ground. We were doing our weekly patrol of the thermal areas, checking monitoring equipment and making sure no geothermal features had shifted or become dangerous. The snowmobile ride from our station took about 40 minutes. Jake led the way, his machine cutting a fresh trail through 4 feet of powder. The morning sun made the snow blindingly bright, and the steam from distant geysers rose into the frozen air like smoke signals from another world. We reached the Norris area around 10 a.m. Norris is the hottest and most dynamic thermal basin in Yellowstone, sitting directly over one of the most active parts of the volcanic system underneath. Even in the dead of winter, the ground here was warm enough to melt the snow, creating bizarre patterns of brown earth surrounded by white drifts. Steam vents hissed and bubbled, and the smell of sulfur hung heavy in the air. "You ever think about what's down there?" Jake asked as we dismounted our snowmobiles. He was staring at a particularly active steam vent, watching the superheated vapor pour out of the earth. "Magma chamber," I said, checking my equipment log. "About 4 miles down, give or take. 4 miles of rock between us and molten hell." Jake's breath came out in white clouds. "Makes you feel small, doesn't it?" "Everything out here makes me feel small." We split up to check different monitoring stations. Jake headed west, toward some backcountry thermal features that weren't on the main tourist routes. I worked my way through the Norris Basin, recording temperatures, checking for new thermal activity, the routine work that kept the park safe. I was about 2 hours into my checks when my radio crackled. "Luke, you need to see this." Jake's voice had an edge to it I'd never heard before. "What have you got?" "There's a cave. I've been patrolling this area for 12 years, and I've never seen this cave before." I felt a prickle of unease. Thermal areas were constantly changing. New vents could open up, old ones could collapse. But a cave appearing overnight? That was unusual. "Give me your coordinates." Jake rattled off his GPS position, about 1.5 miles from where I was. "I'm going to check it out. The opening is warm, definitely geothermal. Could be a new vent system. Wait for me. Don't go in alone. Just going to peek inside, see how deep it goes. Jake, that's protocol. Wait for backup before entering any confined space. There was a pause on the radio. Then, Luke, there's something strange about this cave. The steam pattern, the way it's venting. It's almost like it's breathing, regular intervals. In and out. All the more reason to wait. I'm on my way. Copy that. I'll wait at the entrance. I packed up my equipment and headed toward Jake's coordinates. The terrain was rough, steep hills covered in snow with patches of bare thermal ground in between. It took me almost 30 minutes to reach the area I found Jake's snowmobile parked near a rocky outcropping. But no sign of Jake. The cave entrance was exactly as he'd described. A roughly circular opening about 6 feet in diameter. Carved into the hillside, steam poured out in regular pulses, and the rocks around the entrance were warm enough to be free of snow. "Jake," I called out. "You here?" No response. I approached the cave entrance carefully. The warmth radiating from inside was intense, easily 80 or 90 degrees despite the sub-zero air temperature. I shined my flashlight into the opening. The cave descended at a steep angle. The walls smooth and glassy, almost like they'd been melted. I could see about 30 feet down before the passage curved out of sight. And there, on the cave floor, was Jake's radio and his backpack. My heart rate kicked up. "Jake, can you hear me?" My voice echoed down into the darkness, but there was no reply. I tried the radio. "Jake, this is Luke. If you can hear me, respond." Static. Nothing. I examined Jake's abandoned gear. His radio was still on, battery at full charge. His backpack was open, the contents undisturbed. It was like he'd just set it down and walked deeper into the cave. That's when I noticed the footprints. The cave floor was covered in a thin layer of condensation, almost muddy in texture. Jake's boot prints led down into the darkness, clear as day. But I couldn't see any prints coming back out. I should have called for backup right then. That was protocol. But Jake was my partner, my friend. And something about this situation felt urgent in a way I couldn't explain. I grabbed my larger flashlight from my snowmobile, put on my climbing harness and rope, and entered the cave. The temperature change was immediate and disorienting. Outside was -28. Inside, it quickly climbed to 70, then 80, then 90 degrees. I unzipped my parka, sweat already forming on my forehead. The cave descended steeply, the smooth walls reflecting my flashlight beam. Every 20 seconds, I felt that breathing pattern Jake had mentioned, a warm-up draft that would flow past me, carrying the smell of sulfur and something else, something almost metallic. Then it would reverse, cool air being pulled deeper into the earth. I followed Jake's footprints down, 30 feet, 50 feet. The passage curved and twisted, always descending. The walls showed signs of extreme heat exposure. The rock literally glazed and smooth like pottery. At about 80 feet down, I found his jacket, just lying there on the cave floor, as if he'd gotten too hot and discarded it. "Jake!" I shouted, my voice echoing weirdly in the confined space. "Jake, answer me!" Nothing. I pressed on, now genuinely worried. The temperature was well over 100 degrees. I'd stripped down to my thermal underwear top, my winter gear abandoned behind me. The air was thick, hard to breathe, heavy with moisture and gases. 100 feet down. 120. The cave opened into a larger chamber, maybe 20 feet across. My flashlight beam barely reached the far wall. And there, in the center of the chamber, was another of Jake's items, his ranger hat. I walked over and picked it up. It was warm, almost hot to the touch. And underneath it, carved into the stone floor, was something that made my blood run cold. Letters, scratched into the rock with some kind of tool. They were crude but readable. Turn back, 1971. The date sent a chill through me despite the heat. 1971, 23 years ago. Someone had been down here before, and they'd left a warning. I shined my flashlight around the chamber more carefully. There were other markings on the walls. More dates. 1948, 1925, 1902. And next to each date, initials Rangers, I realized. These were Rangers who'd come down here before. The breathing pattern of the cave intensified. The warm updraft became almost wind-like, and with it came a sound low and resonant, like a massive pipe organ playing a single deep note. It vibrated in my chest, in my bones, and then I heard it. A voice echoing from deeper in the cave system. "Luke, you can see it from here. It's beautiful." Jake's voice, but wrong somehow. The cadence was off, the tone too flat. "Jake, where are you? Come see the heart of the mountain." I moved toward the voice, toward a passage on the far side of the chamber. The temperature was climbing toward 120 degrees. I knew I should turn back. This was dangerous, potentially lethal, but Jake was down here somewhere and he needed help. The passage narrowed again, forcing me to crouch. Jake's footprints continued, but now there was something else. Smears on the walls, like he'd been touching them as he walked, or steadying himself. "Jake, I'm coming. Just hang on. It's singing, Luke. Can you hear it singing?" I could hear it. That deep, resonant tone was growing louder, more complex. It wasn't just one note anymore. It was harmonics, overtones, creating an almost musical pattern. And despite the danger, despite my training screaming at me to get out, I found myself drawn to it. The passage opened into another chamber, larger than the first. And there, silhouetted against a faint red glow coming from deeper below, was Jake. He was standing at the edge of what looked like a vertical shaft, looking down into it. Steam rose around him, making him seem ghostly and insubstantial. "Jake!" I ran toward him. He turned to look at me, and in the beam of my flashlight I saw his face. He was smiling, but it was a smile I'd never seen on him before, peaceful, almost blissful, and his eyes reflected the red glow from below, making them shine like embers. "Luke, brother, you made it. Come look, come see what I found." I approached cautiously, rope in hand, ready to secure him and pull him out. "Jake, we need to leave, now. The air down here, it's not safe. You could be suffering from carbon dioxide narcosis or hydrogen sulfide exposure." "I'm not suffering, Luke. I'm enlightened." He looked back down the shaft. "There's something down there, something old, older than the park, older than the mountains. It's been here since the Earth was young." "That's the gases talking, Jake. Please, let me help you out of here." He looked at me again, and for a moment, I saw confusion in his eyes. Like part of him knew something was wrong. "I can't leave. It's calling me. Don't you hear it calling?" I did hear it. That musical resonance had become almost hypnotic. And now that I was closer to the shaft, I could see what was causing the red glow. Far below, maybe 200 feet down, there was light. Actual light, coming from the earth itself. The color of molten rock, pulsing in rhythm with the breathing of the cave. "We'll come back," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "With proper equipment, a full team, we'll explore it the right way." Jake shook his head slowly. "It doesn't want a team, Luke. It wants us. Rangers. It always wants rangers. Every 23 years, when the cycle completes, it calls and we answer." "What are you talking about?" He gestured to the walls around us. "Look, see for yourself." I shined my flashlight around the chamber, and my stomach dropped. The walls were covered in names and dates, dozens of them going back over a century. All rangers, all with dates spaced roughly 23 years apart, and all of them ended the same way, with the word descended carved next to the name. It's a pattern, Jake said. The volcanic cycle. Every 23 years, the magma chamber shifts. The gases change composition. And something wakes up down there, something that was here long before humans. It sends out a call, and rangers, we're drawn to it. We can't help ourselves. That's insane, Jake. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I ever have. He turned back to the shaft. I'm going down, Luke. I have to see it, the heart of the mountain, the core of the caldera. Whatever's down there, it's been waiting for me. Waiting for 23 years since the last time. Since 1971, I said, remembering the warning carved in the floor above Ranger Thomas Blackwood. He made it the deepest, all the way to the heart, and then he never came back up. But he saw it, Luke. He saw what's down there. And now it's my turn. I moved toward him, ready to tackle him if necessary, to drag him out by force. But as I got closer, the compulsion hit me too. It was like a voice in my head, but not a voice, more like a feeling, an overwhelming need to descend, to go deeper, to see what Jake was talking about. The singing grew louder, more beautiful, and I found myself looking down the shaft, drawn to that red glow. For a moment, I understood. Whatever was down there, it wanted us not to harm us, but to show us something. Something humans weren't meant to see but couldn't resist once they got close enough. I snapped back to reality when Jake took a step toward the edge. No! I lunged forward and grabbed him, but he was strong, fueled by whatever compulsion had taken hold. We struggled at the edge of the shaft, and for a horrible moment I thought we were both going to fall. Then Jake stopped fighting. He looked at me with sudden clarity, his eyes focusing. Luke, what's happening to me? We're getting out of here now. I managed to get the rope around him and started pulling him away from the shaft. He came reluctantly, like a child being dragged from a toy store. Every few steps, he'd look back, his expression a mixture of longing and fear. We made it back to the larger chamber, then started up the ascending passage. The climb was brutal. Jake was barely helping, his attention constantly drawn back toward the depths. And I was feeling it too now, that pull, that need to turn around and go back down. Halfway up, Jake stopped moving entirely. I can't, he said. Luke, I can't leave. It's too strong. The call is too strong. You can. We're almost out. Just keep moving. You don't understand. It's in my head, in my blood. It knows me now. I'm part of it. I pulled harder on the rope, dragging him when he wouldn't walk. My muscles screamed with the effort, the heat exhaustion making every movement difficult. We emerged into the daylight an hour later. The cold air hit us like a physical blow, and Jake collapsed in the snow, gasping. I fell next to him, my vision swimming, my body shaking from exertion and adrenaline. For several minutes, we just lay there, breathing in the clean, freezing air. The singing from below had stopped. The compulsion faded, leaving behind only exhaustion and a deep, gnawing anxiety. "What was that?" Jake finally asked, his voice hoarse. "I don't know. But we need to report this. Get a team out here. Seal the cave if necessary." Jake grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "No. No teams. Don't you see? That's how it spreads. More people means more people called. We seal it ourselves, right now." "Jake, we need to follow protocol." "Fuck protocol, Luke. Listen to me. I've been a ranger for 18 years. I've seen things in this park that don't make sense. Thermal features that appear and disappear, animal behavior that defies explanation. But this is different. This is active, intelligent, and it's waking up. I looked at the cave entrance, still breathing its warm, sulfurous breath into the frozen air. What do you propose? We collapse it, use the explosives from my snowmobile. We carry them for avalanche control. We bring down enough rock to seal this entrance permanently. It was against every regulation, every bit of training. But looking at Jake's face, seeing the genuine terror there mixed with something else, a lingering hunger to return to that shaft, I knew he was right. We spent the next 3 hours rigging the cave entrance with demolition charges. It wasn't elegant, but it would work. Jake positioned the explosives while I hauled rock and prepared the detonation sequence. As we worked, I noticed something disturbing. Every few minutes, Jake would stop and stare at the cave entrance, his expression distant. And I felt it too. A subtle pull, a whisper at the edge of my consciousness, urging me to go back down, to forget the explosives and return to that shaft, to that red glow, to the singing heart of the mountain. We set the charges at 4 p.m. as the sun was starting to drop toward the horizon. We retreated to a safe distance and I handed Jake the detonator. "You should do it," I said. He looked at the device in his hand, then at the cave entrance. For a long moment, I thought he wouldn't do it. Thought the compulsion would be too strong. Then he pressed the button. The explosion was muffled, most of the force directed inward. The hillside shuddered and the cave entrance collapsed in on itself. Tons of rock sealing the passage. When the dust settled, there was nothing left but a pile of rubble and a few wisps of steam escaping between the stones. We rode back to the station in silence, arriving just after dark. The temperature had dropped to -35, but I barely felt it. My mind was still down in that cave, still hearing that song, still seeing that red glow. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the shaft, saw the names carved in the walls, saw Jake's face lit by the crimson light from below. Around 3 a.m., I heard movement outside my cabin. I looked out to see Jake standing in the snow, staring south toward where we'd collapsed the cave. He was in his underwear, barefoot in the killing cold, and he didn't seem to feel it at all. I ran outside and grabbed him. His skin was ice cold, but he was smiling. "It's still singing," he whispered. "Even under all that rock, I can still hear it singing." I dragged him inside, wrapped him in blankets, and stayed with him the rest of the night. He alternated between shivering and staring blankly at the wall, occasionally mumbling about the heart of the mountain. When morning came, I made a decision. I wrote a report. Not the official one I'd file with the Park Service, but a real one. Everything that happened, everything we saw, I sealed it in an envelope and addressed it to the regional supervisor with instructions not to open it unless something happened to me or Jake. Then I filed the official report. A simple thermal vent had opened up. We'd assessed it as unstable and collapsed it for safety reasons. Routine backcountry work. The supervisor approved the report without question. Why wouldn't he? We were experienced rangers doing routine maintenance. But Jake knew. And I knew. And somewhere under tons of collapsed rock, 4 miles above a pool of molten stone, something old and patient knew too. It had called to Jake. It had called to me. And even though we'd sealed the entrance, even though we'd resisted, I could still feel it. A faint echo in the back of my mind. A melody I couldn't quite forget. Jake was right about one thing. We couldn't tell anyone. Because now that we knew it was there, now that we'd heard its song, we were connected to it, and every day that connection grew stronger. It was January 17th, 1994. We'd collapsed the cave 2 days ago. I didn't know it then, but we had 23 years until the next cycle, and I was already counting down. 3 weeks after we collapsed the cave, Jake requested a transfer. I found out when the regional supervisor called me into his office at the Mammoth headquarters. It was early February, and the snow had piled up so high around the buildings that we'd had to dig tunnels between structures. "Luke, I need to talk to you about your partner," Supervisor Gerald Hartman said, gesturing for me to sit. "Jake Reeves put in for immediate transfer to Glacier National Park. He's citing personal reasons, but I wanted to get your read on the situation. You two have been working together for 3 years. I kept my expression neutral, even though my stomach was churning. Jake's a good ranger. If he needs a change, that's his choice. He seemed off during his last check-in, distracted, not sleeping well according to the winter crew reports. You know anything about that?" "Everything," I wanted to say. I know he can't sleep because he hears singing in his dreams. I know he stands outside in sub-zero temperatures, staring south toward a collapsed cave. I know he's terrified of what's growing inside his head. "Winter duty is hard on some people," I said instead. "The isolation, the cold. Maybe he needs to be around more people." Hartman studied me for a long moment. "And you? You planning to stick it out?" "Yes, sir. I like the quiet." "All right, I'll approve Jake's transfer. We'll get you a new partner for the rest of the season. In the meantime, stay safe out there. The weather's getting worse, and I don't want any solo operations unless absolutely necessary." I left his office with a sense of dread. Jake was running, and I didn't blame him. But I couldn't run. Not yet. Because I needed to understand what we'd encountered down in that cave that night. I went to Jake's cabin. He was packing, throwing clothes and equipment into duffel bags with mechanical efficiency. "So you're really leaving?" I said from the doorway. He didn't look up. "I have to. Luke, I can't stay here. Every night it gets stronger. The pull, the singing. I dream about going back, about digging through all that rubble with my bare hands. If I stay, I'm afraid I will." "I feel it too." That made him stop. He looked at me, and I saw the fear and relief in his eyes. Relief that he wasn't alone. Fear that I was infected too. "How bad?" he asked. "Not as bad as you, I think, but it's there. A whisper at the edge of my thoughts. A melody I can't quite remember but can't forget." Jake sat down heavily on his bed. "I've been researching, using the park's historical archives. Luke, this has been happening for a long time. Not just 23 years. Centuries, maybe longer." "What do you mean?" He pulled out a folder stuffed with photocopied documents. I found journals from early rangers, going back to the 1870s when Yellowstone first became a park. Almost all of them mention strange compulsions near thermal areas. Dreams of descending. Some of them even mention the breathing hole. I took the folder and flipped through it page after page of accounts, all similar. Rangers drawn to specific thermal features. Some resisted, some didn't. And the ones who didn't were often found days or weeks later, if they were found at all, in remote thermal areas, dead from exposure or toxic gas inhalation. "There's a pattern," Jake continued. "Every 23 to 24 years, the incidents spike. More rangers affected, more disappearances. It corresponds with seismic activity in the caldera. When the magma chamber shifts, when pressure builds, that's when it gets strong." "It," I repeated. "What is it, Jake? What's down there?" "I don't know, but whatever it is, it's been here a lot longer than humans have. And it's patient. Every cycle it calls. Some answer, most don't survive. And the ones who do," he looked at me with haunted eyes, "we're changed, marked. We'll hear it for the rest of our lives. Then why are you running? If it's in our heads, distance won't matter. Because proximity makes it worse. The closer I am to that spot, the stronger the pull. At Glacier, maybe I'll be far enough away to think clearly, to live something like a normal life. I understood, but I couldn't follow him, not yet. I'm staying, I said. Someone needs to monitor it, make sure it doesn't break through again. Luke, that's exactly what it wants. It wants a watcher, someone close, someone it can work on slowly. Maybe, but I need to understand it. And I think there's more to find here, more records, more history. If this has been happening for centuries, there must be documentation we haven't found yet. Jake stood and put his hand on my shoulder. Be careful, brother. This thing, whatever it is, it's smart, patient. It's been playing the long game for a very long time. Don't let it make you into something you're not. He left the next morning. I watched his truck disappear down the snow-packed road and felt more alone than I ever had in my life. For the next month, I threw myself into research. The park had extensive archives, most of them poorly organized, stored in the basement of the Heritage Center at Mammoth. I spent every off-duty hour down there, going through boxes of old documents, journals, photographs, looking for anything related to the thermal caves or the patterns Jake had discovered. I found more than I expected. In a box dated 1923, I discovered the journal of Ranger Thomas Blackwood. The name was familiar. He was one of the names Ned carved in the cave wall, dated 1971. But this journal was from 50 years earlier, written when he was a young ranger fresh out of college. The entries were mundane at first: weather observations, wildlife counts, maintenance notes. But then, in October of 1923, the tone changed. October 12, 1923. Discovered a thermal cave near Norris Basin today. Opening appears recent, possibly created by seismic shift last month. Cave descends at steep angle. Warm-up draft creating regular breathing pattern. We'll investigate further tomorrow, October 13, 1923. Descended approximately 150 feet into thermal cave. Temperature excessive. Found evidence of previous visitors. Names carved in walls dating back to 1902. One name, Edward Marsh, matches missing ranger from that year. Should report this, but something about the cave compels further exploration. October 14, 1923. Cannot stop thinking about the cave. Dreams filled with red light and singing. Like a chorus of voices, or perhaps just one voice with infinite harmonics, must return. October 15, 1923. Descended to 300 feet. Found chamber with vertical shaft. Light emanating from below, color of molten rock. The singing is clearer here. It speaks without words, tells me to come deeper, to see the heart. Am resisting, but increasingly difficult. October 16, 1923. Collapsed the cave entrance. Used explosives. Sealed it with tons of rock. The singing stopped, but I can still hear it in my dreams. Fear I've made terrible mistake. Should have descended. Should have seen what it wanted to show me. The last entry was dated November 2nd, 1923. The singing has faded, but it hasn't stopped. I know it's still there, waiting beneath the rock, waiting for the next cycle. I'll be old if I live to see it, perhaps dead, but something tells me I'll return. When it calls again in 1946, I'll be there, and next time I'll descend all the way. I flipped through this rest of the journal, but there were no more entries. I checked the park records for Thomas Blackwood. He'd served as a ranger until 1946, when he'd requested extended leave during the summer months. He never returned from that leave. His body was found in October 1946, at the bottom of a thermal fissure near Norris Basin. The medical examiner ruled it an accidental fall, but I knew better. The cycle had called him back, and this time he'd answered. But the journal said he'd died in 1946, so how had his name been carved in the cave in 1971? Unless it wasn't the same Thomas Blackwood, unless it was someone else with the same name, or unless... I didn't want to finish that thought. I kept digging through the archives and found more journals, more accounts, more evidence of the cycle. In 1902, Ranger Edward Marsh had disappeared into a thermal cave. His body was never found, but his journal was, describing the same experience. The breathing cave, the singing, the overwhelming compulsion to descend. In 1879, before Yellowstone even had official rangers, a cavalry officer named John Patterson had written about finding a door to hell in the thermal basins he'd descended alone, and emerged 3 days later, nearly dead from dehydration and heat exposure, babbling about the old one that lived in the magma. The pattern went back as far as I could find records, every 23 to 24 years. Someone discovered the cave. Someone descended, and whether they sealed it or died in it, the cycle continued. I was so deep in research that I almost didn't notice when my new partner arrived. Her name was Jennifer Payne, a ranger transferred from Yosemite. She was in her late 20s, competent and serious, with the kind of confidence that came from years of backcountry work. I met her at the station in early March. "Luke Chadwick?" She extended her hand. "I'm your new winter partner. Heard you had a rough season." "Where'd you hear that?" "Supervisor Hartman mentioned your previous partner transferred out suddenly, didn't give details, but he seemed concerned about you working alone." I shook her hand. "I'm fine, just focused on some historical research." "About thermal features. I saw the archives spread out in your cabin." I'd gotten careless, leaving documents visible. "Yeah, just fascinated by the geology." She smiled, but her eyes were sharp, evaluating. "I've got a background in volcanology. Did my master's thesis on caldera systems. If you want to talk geology, I'm your person." Over the next few weeks, Jennifer proved to be an excellent ranger. Professional, skilled, and curious about everything. Too curious, I sometimes thought. She asked a lot of questions about the park's thermal features, about unusual seismic activity, about the historical disappearances of rangers in the area. I deflected as much as I could. But she was smart, and she noticed things. It was mid-March when she found the collapsed cave. We were doing a patrol of the Norris backcountry, checking weather station equipment. We'd split up to cover more ground, and I'd specifically routed her away from the area where Jake and I had sealed the cave. But thermal areas are unpredictable, and she'd noticed some unusual steam venting from a hillside she'd gone to investigate. I heard her on the radio. "Luke, I found something interesting. Looks like a recent rock slide, but the thermal signature is unusual. I'm going to take some temperature readings." My blood went cold. "Jennifer, where exactly are you?" She gave me coordinates. They were less than 50 yards from the sealed cave. "Wait for me. Don't approach any thermal vents without backup." I pushed my snowmobile as fast as I dared, racing across the snow. By the time I reached her position, she was standing at the edge of the rock slide, thermal imaging camera in hand. "This is fascinating," she said as I approached. "The heat signature suggests a significant geothermal feature under all this collapsed rock. And look at this," she pointed to a gap between two large boulders. "Steam is venting through here in a regular pattern, almost like breathing. We should mark it and move on. Get a full survey team out here in spring." "But Luke, this could be significant. If there's a new geothermal cave system here, we need to document it properly. And these temperature readings..." She checked her camera. "This is unusually hot. Whatever's under here is active." I was about to insist we leave when I felt it. That familiar pull, that whisper at the edge of my consciousness. And I realized with horror that the collapse hadn't been complete. The cave was still there, still breathing, still calling, and Jennifer could feel it too. I saw her expression change, becoming distant, focused. She took a step toward the gap in the rocks. "No," I said sharply, grabbing her arm. "We're leaving, now." She looked at me, confused and a little annoyed. "Luke, what's wrong? This is literally our job. Investigating unusual thermal features. Not this one. This one is dangerous." "How do you know that?" I didn't have a good answer, not one I could give her. "Trust me, please. We need to leave." She studied my face, and I saw the moment she decided something was wrong. Not with the cave, but with me. "Okay," she said slowly. "We'll leave. But Luke, you need to tell me what's going on. This is the second time you've acted strange about thermal features in this area." As we rode back to the station, I could feel it growing stronger. The collapse hadn't sealed the cave completely. There were gaps, cracks in the rock where the call could get through, and it was getting louder. That night, I made a decision. I had to finish what Jake and I had started. I had to seal the cave completely, permanently, even if it meant doing something drastic. I spent the next day quietly gathering supplies. More explosives than we'd used before. Enough to collapse not just the entrance, but the entire cave system. It would require going back inside, placing charges deep enough to bring down the whole thing, which meant descending into the cave one more time. The thought terrified me, but it also excited me in a way I couldn't explain. Part of me wanted to go back down, wanted to hear the singing up close again, wanted to see that red glow. That was the most frightening part. I couldn't trust my own motivations anymore. I waited until Jennifer was out on a solo patrol, then loaded my snowmobile with the explosives and headed to the cave. It was late afternoon, the sun already dropping toward the mountains, temperature plummeting. At the collapsed entrance, I started digging through the rubble. It took 2 hours to clear enough rock to squeeze through, and as soon as I did, I felt it. The call, stronger than ever. The cave was still there, still breathing, still singing. The collapse had partially blocked it, but the main passage was intact. I descended with my pack full of explosives, placing charges every 20 feet. The temperature climbed rapidly, and soon I was sweating despite my light clothing. At the large chamber, I placed the largest charge. This would be the one to collapse the entire system, but to make sure it worked, I needed to go deeper, to the shaft Jake and I had found, to place charges there too. I approached the vertical shaft and the singing hit me like a physical force. It was louder, clearer than before. And I could understand it now, not words exactly, but meaning. Come down. See what we've waited to show you. Understand what sleeps in the stone. You're marked, you're chosen, you're ours. I stood at the edge looking down into that red glow, and for a moment I genuinely considered it. What if I just let go? What if I descended all the way, saw what was at the heart of the mountain, and accepted whatever fate the others had found? Then I heard a voice behind me, a real voice. "Luke, what the hell are you doing?" I turned to see Jennifer, emerging from the passage, her face flushed from the heat and exertion. She looked at me, at the shaft, at the explosives in my hands. "You knew." She said. "You knew this cave was here. You've been here before. Jennifer, you need to leave right now. Not until you tell me what's going on. What is this place? And why are you rigging it with explosives?" The singing grew louder, and I saw Jennifer's expression change. She heard it too. "What is that sound?" she whispered. "It's the breathing hole," I said. using the term from the old journals. It's a connection to the caldera to something old that lives in the magma, and it calls to people, compels them. If we don't seal it now completely, it will spread. Jennifer took a step toward the shaft. Drawn by the sound, I grabbed her arm. Don't look down. Don't listen to it. We need to set these charges and get out. But it was too late. She'd already looked. She'd already heard. And I saw in her eyes the same thing I'd seen in Jake's eyes. The same thing I'd felt myself. The mark, the call, the connection. It's beautiful, she whispered. Luke, can you see the light? Can you hear what it's trying to say? I pulled her away from the shaft, and she fought me, stronger than I expected. We struggled at the edge, and I felt the heat from below, smelled the sulfur, heard the singing reach a crescendo. Then Jennifer stopped fighting. She looked at me with sudden clarity. We both heard it, she said. We're both marked now. I nodded. Then let's finish this. Let's bury it so deep it can never call anyone else. Together, we placed the final charges deep in the shaft, as far as we could reach without descending. Then we climbed back up, back through the cave system, back to the surface. We emerged just as the sun touched the horizon. The sky was on fire with orange and red, and the steam from the cave entrance rose like a beacon. I held the detonator in my hand. This time, there would be no partial collapse. This time, the entire hillside would come down. Do it, Jennifer said. I pressed the button. The explosion was massive. The ground shook like an earthquake, and the entire hillside collapsed inward, creating a crater 50 feet deep. Rock and earth poured into the void, filling the cave, crushing the passages, sealing the shaft. When the dust settled, there was nothing left. Just a depression in the ground where the cave had been. Jennifer and I stood there in the growing darkness, not speaking. The singing had stopped, the call was gone, but I knew it wasn't over. Couldn't be over. Because somewhere 4 miles down, in the magma beneath Yellowstone, the heart of the mountain still beat, and in 23 years it would call again. We drove back to the station in silence. I filed a report about unstable thermal features and controlled demolition for safety reasons. Jennifer backed up my account. But that night she came to my cabin. I need to know everything, she said. The whole story, because I can still hear it, Luke, faint, like an echo. But it's there. So I told her everything. The journals, the pattern, the history going back centuries. Jake's experience and mine, the mark we now carried. So we're infected, she said when I finished. Carriers of whatever this is. Yes, but we can resist. Jake's been at Glacier for months now. He says it's fading, distance and time help. But it never goes away completely. No, I don't think it does. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'm staying, for the rest of the season. We'll monitor it together. Make sure it stays buried, and then we'll see. Maybe in 23 years, we'll be far away from here. Maybe we'll forget, or maybe we'll come back, like all the others did. I knew which one was more likely, because I'd read the journals. I'd seen the pattern. The ones who heard the call never really escaped it. We were marked. We were chosen. And somewhere beneath tons of rock and earth, the breathing hole was waiting, just waiting, for the next cycle, for us to return. 22 years, 11 months, and 13 days after we buried the breathing hole, I received a call from Jake Reeves. I was living in Bozeman by then, working as a wilderness survival instructor, as far from active park service as I could get while staying close to the mountains. I'd left Yellowstone the season after the second collapse, unable to bear the constant pull, the whisper that never quite went away. Jennifer had stayed for 2 more winters before transferring to Olympic National Park in Washington. We'd kept in touch sporadically over the years, both of us dancing around the subject we never wanted to discuss but couldn't forget. The phone rang at 2 a.m. on a Saturday in December. I knew who it was before I answered. "Luke." Jake's voice was older, rougher, but unmistakable. "It's starting again." I sat up in bed, instantly awake. "What do you mean?" "The dreams. They started 3 weeks ago. Just whispers at first, but they're getting louder every night. And yesterday I was at the grocery store and I zoned out completely. When I came to, I'd driven 20 miles south without realizing it, toward Yellowstone." My stomach clenched. I'd been having the dreams too, not every night, but often enough to disturb my sleep. Dreams of red light and singing. Dreams of descending. "It's been almost 23 years, I said. 22 years, 11 months, 13 days. I've been counting. Luke, the cycle is completing. It's going to call again. And this time I don't think I can resist." "Where are you now?" "Home in Missoula. But I won't be for long. I can feel it pulling. Every day the compulsion gets stronger. Soon I won't be able to stop myself from driving down there." I knew the feeling. Over the past month, I'd found myself taking drives south, getting closer to the park each time before forcing myself to turn around. "We sealed it," I said, trying to convince myself as much as him. 2 massive collapses. There's no way the cave is still accessible. "You really believe that?" "Luke, we both know that thing doesn't need a physical cave. It's in our heads. It's been waiting patiently for 23 years and now it's time to collect. Then we fight it. We stay away. I can't fight it anymore. I'm too tired. I've spent 23 years running and I'm done. I just wanted to call and tell you. I'm going back. When it fully wakes up, when the cycle completes, I'm going to answer the call. And I wanted you to know it's my choice, not the thing controlling me. My choice to finally find out what's at the heart of the mountain. Jake, no, take care of yourself, brother. And if you can resist, do it. Don't end up like me." He hung up. I sat in the darkness of my bedroom, the phone still in my hand, knowing I should call someone, the Park Service, local authorities, someone who could stop Jake from doing what I knew he was going to do. But I didn't, because part of me understood, part of me wanted to go back too. Instead, I called Jennifer. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice thick with sleep. "Luke, what time is it? We need to talk about the breathing hole." There was a long silence, then. "I know. I've been feeling it too. The pull is getting stronger. Jake called. He's going back. When? Soon. The cycle is almost complete." Another silence, longer this time. When Jennifer spoke again, her voice was different, resigned. "Luke, I've been researching. Spent the last 5 years going through every archive I could access. University libraries, historical societies, old Park Service records. I've found documentation of the pattern going back almost 200 years. Every cycle, someone goes back, and they all describe the same thing: the breathing hole, the singing, the compulsion to descend. Did any of them survive? Some came back out, but they were changed. The journals describe them as haunted, obsessed. Most died within a few years, usually seeking out other thermal features, trying to find another way down. The ones who descended all the way, they never came back. What do you think is down there, really? I have a theory, but you're not going to like it. Tell me." I heard her take a deep breath. "Yellowstone sits on a supervolcano. The magma chamber underneath is one of the largest in the world. That much molten rock, that much energy, concentrated in one place for hundreds of thousands of years. What if it developed something like consciousness? That's insane. Is it? We know consciousness emerges from complexity, neural networks, patterns of electrical activity. What if geological systems can develop similar patterns? Magnetic fields, thermal currents, chemical reactions happening at unimaginable scales over vast time periods. What if the caldera itself is alive in some way we can't comprehend? And it's been calling to people for centuries. Not just people, rangers specifically. Why? Because we're the ones who pay attention, who monitor the thermal features, track the changes, spend time in the remote areas. We're the ones most likely to notice when a breathing hole opens. So, what does it want? Maybe nothing. Maybe it's not conscious in a way we understand. Maybe it's just a pattern, a resonance in the Earth's magnetic field that happens to interact with human neurology. Or maybe, she hesitated. Maybe what? Maybe it wants to be known. Maybe consciousness, whatever form it takes, wants to be recognized by other conscious beings, and the only way it can communicate is through these rare alignments when the geological conditions are right. I thought about that. About the singing, the red light, the overwhelming beauty Jake and I had felt when we stood at the edge of that shaft. "I'm going back," I said. Not to answer the call, but to stop Jake and to understand what we're really dealing with. "I'm coming with you. Jennifer, don't argue. We're both marked. We're both being called. Better to face it together than alone." She was right. We arranged to meet in West Yellowstone. In 3 days I spent those 3 days preparing. I gathered equipment. Not for sealing the cave this time, but for descending. If Jake was going down, I wanted to be able to follow him to bring him back if possible. I also called in a favor from an old friend, Dr. Marcus Webb, a geophysicist at Montana State University. I'd helped him with a backcountry research project years ago, and he owed me. I met him at his office in Bozeman and showed him the data I'd compiled. Seismic readings from Yellowstone over the past century, thermal fluctuations, magnetic field anomalies, all correlated with the 23-year cycle. Marcus studied the data for hours, running his own analyses. Finally, he looked up at me with troubled eyes. "Luke, where did you get this data?" "Compiled it from Park Service archives." "Why?" "Because it shows a pattern that shouldn't exist. The seismic activity, it's not random. It's rhythmic, like a heartbeat. And it peaks every 23.4 years down to the month. What could cause that? Nothing natural. At least nothing we understand. Volcanic systems don't operate on precise cycles like this. They're chaotic, unpredictable. He gestured at the data. "This looks artificial, designed. Could it be some kind of self-organizing system? Feedback loops in the magma chamber creating a regular pattern? Maybe, but for it to maintain this precision over centuries, that would require an incredibly complex mechanism, and there's something else." He pulled up a different data set. "I've been monitoring magnetic field variations in the Yellowstone caldera for my research, and starting about 3 weeks ago, the field strength has been increasing. Not a lot, but measurably. And it's pulsing now. Regular intervals, getting faster. Like it's building toward something." "Exactly. And based on the historical pattern, I'd say it's building toward a peak that will occur." He ran the calculations. "In about 5 days. 5 days. The cycle completion. When the breathing hole would be at its strongest. When Jake would answer the call, I met Jennifer in West Yellowstone on December 18th. We'd both changed in 23 years. She was in her early 50s now, with gray streaking her dark hair, laugh lines around her eyes, but she still had that sharp, intelligent gaze. We embraced briefly, awkwardly, like old soldiers meeting after a war. "You look good," she said. "You're a terrible liar." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I haven't slept well in weeks. The dreams are getting worse. Same. I dream I'm already there, already descending, already seeing. The heart, she finished. Me too. We drove into the park that afternoon. It was deep winter, the road to the interior only open through the north entrance. The landscape was buried under feet of snow, steam from thermal features rising into the frozen air like prayer flags. We checked in at Mammoth, not mentioning our real purpose to anyone. As far as the Park Service knew, we were just former rangers visiting during the off-season. That night we drove south toward Norris Basin. The road was treacherous, covered in ice and snow, but Jennifer's vehicle was equipped with chains and four-wheel drive. "Do you know where it is?" she asked, "the exact location of the collapse?" "I've got GPS coordinates. But Jennifer, there's something I need to tell you. The collapse was massive. We brought down the entire hillside. Even if the breathing hole is still active, even if it's calling, there's no physical way to access it." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Luke, I don't think it needs a physical entrance anymore. Not for us. We're too connected. We've heard the song too many times. I think if we get close enough, if the cycle is strong enough, it will find a way to take us." Her words chilled me more than the sub-zero temperature outside. We reached the location around midnight. The collapsed hillside was there, exactly as we'd left it 23 years ago. A depression in the ground, filled with rock and earth. No sign of the cave that had once existed below. But I could feel it. That familiar pull, stronger than it had ever been. Jennifer felt it too. I saw her close her eyes, swaying slightly. "It's here," she whispered. "It's awake." We set up a camp at a safe distance, inside a snow shelter we'd built. I took the first watch, monitoring the collapse site with thermal imaging equipment. At 3 a.m., I saw something that made my blood freeze. On the thermal camera, the collapsed hillside was glowing. Not just the normal geothermal heat signature, but something else, a pattern. The heat was rising and falling in rhythm, and the pattern looked almost organic. Like a massive organism breathing underneath the rock. I woke Jennifer. She looked at the thermal image and her face went pale. "That's not possible. We buried it under hundreds of tons of rock." "Maybe we didn't bury it," I said. "Maybe we just pushed it deeper. And maybe it's been slowly working its way back up for 23 years. At dawn, we approached the collapse site on foot. The ground was warm here, melting the snow in patches, and in the center of the depression we found something that shouldn't have existed. A hole, maybe 3 feet across, perfectly circular, cutting straight down through the collapsed rock. The walls were smooth, almost glassy, like they'd been melted, and from the depths a warm wind exhaled, carrying that familiar sulfurous smell, and the singing. We could hear it clearly now, not in our heads, but actual sound waves emanating from the hole. That same complex harmonic pattern, beautiful and terrible. Jennifer knelt at the edge, shining her flashlight down. "There are footprints in the condensation. Recent. Jake. He'd already been here, already descended." "We have to go down," I said. "We have to find him." Jennifer looked at me. "Luke, if we go down there, we might not come back up. You know that. I know. But I can't leave him down there, not after 23 years of waiting for this moment." She nodded slowly. "Then we go together, and we document everything. If we don't make it back, at least the next generation will know what we found." We suited up with climbing gear, respirators to filter the toxic gases, cameras to record everything. And then, at 9 a.m. on December 19th, 23 years almost to the hour, since we'd collapsed the cave, we descended into the breathing hole. The passage was tight, barely wide enough for us to squeeze through. The walls were indeed melted, The rock transformed into a glassy substance that reflected our flashlight beams, and everywhere we saw evidence of Jake's passage. Boot prints, handprints where he'd steadied himself, bits of equipment dropped or abandoned. We descended for an hour. The temperature climbed past 90 degrees, then 100, then higher. We stripped off our outer layers, working in minimal clothing, sweat pouring off us. And all the while, the singing grew louder. I could make out individual harmonics now, separate voices blending into a greater whole. And despite my fear, despite knowing the danger, I felt drawn to it, compelled. We reached the first chamber, the one where Jake and I had turned back 23 years ago. The names were still carved in the walls, but there were new additions, names I didn't recognize, all with recent dates, all from the last few weeks. "We're not the only ones who came back," Jennifer said quietly. "Look at this. Thomas Blackwood, December 5th. That can't be the same Thomas Blackwood from the journals. He'd be over 100 years old. Unless the breathing hole didn't just call across space, but across time. Unless all the marked rangers from all the cycles were being drawn here simultaneously." We continued down, following Jake's trail. At the second chamber, we found his climbing harness abandoned, like he'd decided he didn't need it anymore. And then we reached the vertical shaft. It was wider than I remembered, as if it had grown over the years. The red glow from below was brighter, pulsing in rhythm with the breathing. And the singing was overwhelming now, vibrating in my chest, in my bones, in my teeth. Jennifer grabbed my arm. "Luke, look." I followed her pointing finger and saw them, figures descending the walls of the shaft, using handholds and ledges that shouldn't have existed. There were at least a dozen people, all making their way down toward the red light below. "That's Jake," I said, spotting his distinctive red jacket. He was about 200 feet down, moving steadily, purposefully, and around him, the others. Some in modern clothing, some in older Park Service uniforms, some in gear from decades past. All the marked rangers, all being called home. "We can't follow them down," Jennifer said. "Not without proper equipment. That shaft is at least 1,000 feet deep." But even as she said it, I felt the compulsion rising, the need to descend, to see what waited at the bottom, to join Jake and the others in their journey to the heart. I took a step toward the edge. Jennifer pulled me back. "Luke, no. We have to think this through. We need—" And then the singing stopped. For a moment there was absolute silence. The figures on the shaft walls froze in place. Even the breathing paused. Then, from far below, we heard it. A sound like a massive bell tolling, deep, resonant, shaking the rock around us. And the red light intensified, becoming almost white in its brightness. The figures began descending again, faster now. Urgent, drawn by whatever was happening below. "It's happening," Jennifer whispered. "The cycle is completing. The heart is fully awake." From the depths we heard voices, not the singing anymore, but actual voices, speaking in unison, in a language that hurt to hear. Consonants that human mouths weren't meant to form, vowels that vibrated at frequencies that made our vision blur. But underneath the alien sounds I heard meaning. Come. Witness. Know. Become Jennifer, and I stood at the edge of the shaft, torn between our training and the overwhelming compulsion. Every rational thought screamed to run, to get out of the cave, to seal it again if we could, but we'd been marked. We'd been called, and after 23 years of waiting, we were finally going to see what the breathing hole had been trying to show us all along. "Together," Jennifer said, taking my hand. "Together," I agreed, and we stepped off the edge, beginning our descent into the heart of the mountain. The descent took hours, or maybe minutes. Time functioned differently in the shaft, stretching and compressing in ways that defied measurement. Jennifer and I climbed down using handholds that appeared in the rock exactly where we needed them, as if the stone itself was reshaping to accommodate our passage. The temperature continued to climb. 120 degrees, 140, higher than any human should survive. Yet we kept moving. The other descenders were all around us now. I saw Jake about 50 feet below, still wearing his red jacket. And others, so many others. Some I recognized from the carved names in the cave, Thomas Blackwood, looking exactly as he had in photographs from the 1920s. Edward Marsh, from 1902, in his old cavalry uniform. Dozens more, spanning a century or more. "They're not ghosts," Jennifer said, her voice strained from the heat. "They're real. Physical. How is that possible?" I didn't have an answer, but I was beginning to understand that the breathing hole didn't just exist in one time. It was a point where all times intersected, where all the cycles overlapped. And now, at the moment of completion, we were all being drawn together. As we descended deeper, the red light grew brighter, not from molten rock, I realized, from something else. Something that created light without heat, though the heat was certainly there. And the voices. They were clearer now, not alien anymore. Human voices, speaking in harmony. All the descenders, speaking words that bubbled up from somewhere deep in our minds. We are the witnesses. We are the chosen. We are the ones who hear. We are being shown. At what I estimated to be 800 feet down, the shaft opened into a chamber so vast I couldn't see the far walls. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above, and the floor curved away in all directions like we'd entered the inside of a sphere. And in the center, impossibly, was the heart. It wasn't biological. It wasn't rock. It was something between states, a form that my eyes couldn't quite process. I saw crystal structures that grew and dissolved simultaneously. I saw light that flowed like liquid. I saw patterns that existed in more dimensions than my mind could comprehend, and it was singing. The same harmonics we'd been hearing, but now I could see the song. It was vibration made visible, frequencies painting themselves across reality. All the descenders were gathered now, standing in a circle around the heart. Jake was there, his face upturned, tears streaming down his cheeks. Thomas Blackwood stood next to him, and Edward Marsh and dozens of others from across the decades Jennifer and I joined the circle. And the moment we did, I understood. The heart wasn't calling us to die. It wasn't trying to hurt us. It was trying to communicate. For thousands of years, perhaps millions, it had existed beneath Yellowstone. A consciousness born from geological processes we didn't understand. Magnetic fields and thermal currents and crystalline structures creating something that could think, could feel, could know itself. But it was alone, the only one of its kind. And every 23 years, when the volcanic cycle aligned correctly, when the magnetic field reached the proper configuration, it could reach out, could touch the minds of the surface creatures who lived above it, the rangers. We were the ones who listened, who paid attention to the thermal features, who noticed the patterns, who spent time in the remote places we were the only ones who got close enough to hear. And so it called to us, not to consume us or transform us, but simply to be known, to share what it knew, to show us what it had witnessed in its eons of existence. The singing intensified, and suddenly I was seeing through the heart's perception. I saw the earth as it was 1,000,000 years ago. The slow dance of tectonic plates, the rise and fall of mountains, the birth and death of glaciers. I saw the first humans who came to this place, thousands of years before Yellowstone became a park. They had sensed the heart too. Some of their shamans had descended into natural caves and witnessed it. They'd called it the Old One, the Keeper of Fire, the Dreaming Stone. I saw every ranger who'd ever been called, every cycle, every descent, and I saw what happened to them. Most turned back, fled, sealed the caves. They lived with the mark, the memory, the whisper of what they'd almost seen. Some went mad from it. Some spent their lives trying to return. But the ones who descended all the way, the ones who stood where we stood now, they made a choice. Some chose to stay, to merge with the heart, to become part of its consciousness, their bodies transformed into the crystalline structure, their minds expanding to perceive geological time. They became witnesses to deep time, experiencing 1,000,000 years as humans experience a day. Thomas Blackwood chose this. I saw him step forward, saw his physical form begin to dissolve into light and crystal, saw his consciousness expand and merge with the great collective awareness others chose to return, to carry the knowledge back to the surface, to live as emissaries between the deep earth and the shallow world. They went back changed, but whole. Edward Marsh chose this. I saw him climb back up the shaft in 1902, carrying with him an understanding of the planet that would shape his entire worldview. He died young, unable to process what he'd learned, but he'd tried to document it, tried to warn others, and now it was our turn to choose. Looked at Jake. He was staring at the heart with an expression of absolute peace. He'd made his decision. I could see it in his eyes. "I'm staying," he said, and his voice was his own again. Not the dual-toned voice of the called, but Jake, my partner, my friend. "Luke, I need you to understand. This isn't giving up. This isn't being consumed. This is evolution, transformation. I'll still be me, but I'll be more. I'll exist on a scale you can't imagine. Jake, please. I've been running for 23 years, running from this moment. But now that I'm here, I realize I wasn't running from death. I was running toward this, toward understanding, toward becoming part of something greater than myself." He stepped forward, and the light of the heart embraced him. I watched as his physical form began to transform, becoming translucent, then crystalline, then something beyond. But his consciousness remained. I could feel it, growing, expanding, merging with the collective awareness of all those who'd chosen to stay. Jennifer was crying. "We can't save him." "No," I said, "but maybe he doesn't need saving." Around us, other descenders were making their choices, some stepping forward to merge, others turning to climb back up. About half stayed, half returned, the cycle completing itself. Jennifer looked at me. "What do we do?" I looked at the heart, at the incredible beauty of it, at the knowledge it offered. To see the earth as it truly was, not as a static thing but as a living, breathing system operating on time frames beyond human comprehension. To understand the deep connections between rock and magma, between magnetic field and life, between the ancient and the new. It was tempting, so tempting. But I thought about the surface world, about the people who needed protecting, about the future rangers who would patrol Yellowstone, who might hear the call in 23 more years. Someone needed to go back. Someone needed to document what we'd found, to explain it in a way that might help others understand. "We go back," I said. "We witness and return. That's our choice." Jennifer nodded. Together. We turned away from the heart and immediately felt the resistance. The compulsion to stay, to merge, to become part of the eternal. But we pushed against it, using every bit of willpower we had. The ascent was harder than the descent. The handholds didn't appear as readily. The temperature seemed to burn hotter. and with every step, we left part of ourselves behind. The understanding, the knowledge, the expanded consciousness we'd touched began to fade, like a dream dissolving in morning light. By the time we reached the upper chambers, we could barely remember what we'd seen. The details slipped away, replaced by vague impressions and feelings. We emerged from the breathing hole just before dawn on December 20th. The sun was rising over the frozen landscape, painting the snow in shades of gold and pink. We collapsed near our camp, exhausted beyond anything we'd ever experienced. "How much do you remember?" Jennifer asked, after we'd caught our breath, fragments, images, the feeling of it more than the facts. "You? Same, it's fading fast, like our human minds can't hold what we saw." We packed up our camp in silence as we prepared to leave. I looked back at the breathing hole one last time. It was gone. The perfectly circular opening had sealed itself, the rock flowing together like water, leaving no trace it had ever existed. The hillside looked exactly as it had when we'd arrived, just a collapsed depression filled with rubble. The cycle was complete. The calling was done. The heart had returned to its long sleep. "Will it come back?" Jennifer asked. "In another 23 years?" "I think so. As long as the volcanic system exists, as long as the heart exists, it will wake up periodically and it will call. And we'll be drawn back. Maybe. But we know what it is now. And we can choose. That's more than the others had." We drove out of the park that morning. At the north entrance, we filed a report about exploring closed thermal areas for research purposes. Nothing about the breathing hole, nothing about the heart, nothing about what we'd witnessed, because even if we could fully remember it, even if we could articulate it, who would believe us? I returned to Bozeman. Jennifer returned to Olympic. We spoke occasionally over the following months, comparing notes, trying to hold on to what little we could remember. Jake was officially listed as missing, presumed dead in a thermal feature. There was a small memorial service at park headquarters. I attended and said nothing about what I knew, because Jake wasn't dead. He was more alive than he'd ever been, just not in a form anyone on the surface could recognize. 5 years later, I received a package, no return address, no note, just a USB drive. On it was a single video file, thermal camera footage from deep underground, showing the chamber with the heart. The timestamp indicated it had been recorded just days ago, and in the footage, I could see them. The crystalline structures that had once been people Jake's pattern was distinct, his consciousness clearly identifiable even in its transformed state. And he was moving, interacting with the others, part of a vast awareness that observed and documented the slow dance of the Earth's interior. The file was labeled, "We are witnessing. We are well. We are content. J.R." I showed it to Jennifer. We watched it together, and we understood Jake had found what he'd been looking for. Not death, but transformation. Not an ending, but a beginning. It's been 16 years since the descent, December 2033. In 7 years, the cycle will complete again. The breathing hole will open, and the call will go out. I'm 63 years old now, retired from teaching, living quietly in Montana. Jennifer retired from the Park Service 5 years ago and lives in Oregon with her wife. We talk every few months, and we both feel it starting again. The whispers, the dreams, the pull southward. In 7 years, we'll have to make another choice, return to witness again, or stay away and resist the call. I don't know what we'll choose, but I know we'll choose together, because we're marked. We're witnesses. We're the ones who heard and descended and returned. And somewhere, 4 miles beneath Yellowstone, in a chamber that exists outside normal time and space, the heart is beginning to wake, getting ready for the next cycle, ready to call to the next generation of rangers who will listen, who will wonder, who will be unable to resist the pull to descend. The breathing hole is patient. It's been calling for millions of years. It will call for millions more. And there will always be those who answer. I've written this account for the Park Service archives to be sealed until 2040. By then, either Jennifer and I will have returned and can explain further, or we'll be gone, merged with the heart, and this document will be all that remains of our witness to whoever reads this. If you're a ranger at Yellowstone, if you feel a strange compulsion near the thermal features, if you hear singing in your dreams, know that you're not going insane. You're being called, and you'll have to choose whether to answer. I can't tell you what to choose. I can only tell you what I saw. The heart is real. The consciousness beneath the caldera is real. It doesn't mean harm. It simply wants to be known. And if you descend, if you witness, you'll be changed forever. But you'll also understand something precious, something about the deep time of the earth, about consciousness emerging from patterns we don't expect, about the strange and beautiful ways the universe organizes itself. Whether that understanding is worth the price, only you can decide.